Thank you very much, the two presenters, the two professors. My name is Dr. Akani Elime from the University of Rwanda.
You need to predict.
Okay. I want to first of all make a contribution or question to the first presenter, Professor Alagbonsi. I want to especially thank you for your presentation. While you were presenting, I was saying to myself, if this is the only presentation I will listen to in this conference, I'll be very satisfied.
Yes.
Just like physiologists, we know after 120 days, red blood cells die. So there's a question my lecturer once asked, what is the fate of RBC after its lifespan? And students have also asked me a question which is somehow similar to that. What is the fate of physiologists after graduation? So what you presented really is something that I feel we should pay very close attention to. And like you said, you're an action person. I think we have a lot of professors here, very high caliber. I think there is a need for us to take your presentation so seriously if we do not want physiology as an area to be under extinction. So I want to really thank you, and that's what I want to say regarding your presentation. There's a need to form a very formidable action plan to implement some of the solutions you provide. That's for you. Then for our emeritus professor, I want to thank you so much for your presentation. While you were presenting, I was really paying close attention to your presentation because it's an area I really love. Thanks to one mentor I have, Professor Nelson Wray from University College London, who really made me to understand cell signaling and ion channels, although theoretical, not really practically. So I want to ask, what would you like to do for Africa? Because here we are talking about collaboration and how to strengthen physiology. What will you do to Africa? For instance, you know, we understand most of these concepts, the molecular mechanism, theoretically, and we are so passionate, and we know this is where research is actually for Africa, and we'll be happy if you can do that. Thank you.
So I'm only one person and one lab, but you can see already the tendency to collaborate and bring strengths, different strengths together.
Oh, they can't hear your response.
So I think you saw already some of the reasons why we collaborate, because no one lab, no one person, no one group will have all the skills, whether they're in Africa or Europe. So it makes sense to collaborate. Now, I think what you're saying to me is that probably more of the equipment and skills to do the high-end molecular studies lie within the US and Europe. So, okay, if that's the case, think about who to approach and write a good letter saying why you think what you've got is so important, whether it's the kidney disease, uterus, brain. Oh, sorry, okay, it's okay. So that's one thing. I think also, though, the other point to say is not to be satisfied with the status quo in Africa and carry on advocating and making connections and joining dots. So neither side should be passive on this. We need to be proactive. We need to find solutions. And I think just the fact that we're all here today is a good start. But if I could say one thing, it is that I know we are much more privileged in terms of the research, tools and activity within the Western world. But that's not to say that they're finite and there's room in every lab, there's enough resource, because it's always competitive. It's always competitive. So for Africa, I would say build your networks abroad and within the continent, and then more locally. And we've started to do that anyway. Think about what research questions need answers at the molecular level, so that I get an email from you and oh, that's really interesting. And then I'm more likely, aren't I, to then think, well, where could we get some funding from this? How can I get this guy over into the lab for training? So it needs a partnership. So these are profound words. I think they do reflect the pragmatic reality. I mean, several approaches and goodwill and hard work and some work.
Thank you, Prof. We do understand these questions are very pregnant here. Okay, I have another question here.
Thank you to presenters, Professor Alagbonsi, Professor Abdullateef. Okay, Professor Abdullateef, thank you for that good presentation. It's a wake-up call. And I believe from this conference, we not just talk, there's going to be action. And you mentioned something about mentorship, which you just make me slide to the side of Professor Susan. I, for one, I am into smooth muscle contractual research, especially in relation to reproduction. I'm working with couples that are looking at to tackle erectile dysfunction. I have been wary of going into female reproduction because I understand how complicated and complex it can be. So I'm fascinated by what you have just presented. And also in that spirit, I want to be open for mentorship. And just like Mr. Alagbonsi said, I want to be the first person that will benefit from the mentorship from you, because if that's okay by you. Yeah, thank you. Then the second question is, you were mentioning something about the administration of bicarbonates to tackle bilateral lactic acidosis. Yes. I don't know at what stage it is, whether it's now a clinical practice, and if it's a clinical practice, for some of us that our wives, we are still expecting them to get pregnant. What do you advise? I don't know what stage it is in, and if it's already at the final stage, what do you propose? Is there a dosage? Do they start using that from pregnancy, hoping that at the point of labor contraction, it can now favor labor contraction?
Yes.
Thank you.
So it's given to women who have that clinical diagnosis of dysfunctional labour. So now, for example, in that hospital in Sweden, the trial's over, but the midwives saw how well it worked. So now, with no persuasion from anybody, they will now, off the record as it were, recommend that the women have a drink of bicarbonate. It's not, how can I say this politely? The world of obstetrics and childbirth is not very fast moving. And that's why this paper in the BMJ, which helps point some of that out in an analytical, not anecdotal, not in a dogma way, but points out some of those deficiencies in both guidelines and practice. And it's a rallying call for doing better. In that paper, the bicarbonate trials are mentioned, and I'm hoping because of the wide readership, more will try it. Because as I tried to say, getting 5 milligrams of bicarbonate, a teaspoonful, it's not expensive, it's not difficult, and it's safe. And I could criticise my trial quite easily. There was no taking into account of BMI or waist measurements. It was the same dose for all women. There was no repeating it, etc. So there's lots of ways you could improve on that trial. And coming back to something that Tadale said, what about somewhere in South or West or East Africa having a go, doing a proper trial? It doesn't have to be huge, and it's not that expensive. So it isn't widely accepted. I hope it will become more so. If I believed in conspiracies, I would say no pharmacological company is excited about this, because what money can they make out of sodium bicarbonate? Nothing. That does not help. But more people that listen, that do the reading, I think it will spread. And as I say, it's not just our trial in Sweden. There's a group in Egypt 2 years later repeated it and got similar results. So that's really good news.
Okay. To summarize for her, your first step of mentorship begins with you reading the paper.
So I'm going to have 3 more questions. I only see 3 more hands. Well, this is just 3 hands. I'm going to have 1 And then one from and I'm going to do the gender bias. I'm going to have a lady here. Fine, I'll have yours as well. So 4 more questions and then we'll close the session.
So thank you very much for your presentations. I have a question to both of you. First, Professor Abdullateef, what do you think? There will be a long way until many Africans, many laboratories in Africa can have the same financial support than to build up the proper methods or something like this. I wonder what you think about developing your own profiles. For example, in silico physiology, we are having severe lack of physiological modeling. And given all the data that are available and artificial intelligence, it could be worthwhile to add to the curriculum some IT knowledge. Because modeling is something where you don't need other expensive equipment, and it could be a chance to develop an own profile, which would be very helpful.
Thank you very much. I'll just answer that question in a very brief way. So I think concerning what can be done on how to address the issue of where Africa is to where we wish to be. So it requires a lot of advocacy with the government body. When you look at the US system, for instance, the big funding in US research is from NIH. So the question is that, so do we have something like that in every country in Africa? For instance, when you look at Nigeria, we have TED. When you look at Rwanda, we have NCST, National Council for Science and Technology. Some countries have bodies, funding, but what is the process of the funding? It requires a situation whereby you must know the executive secretary of that organization before you can get grants. Some people get grants, they use it to buy a car, to build a house, not even for research. So the process of getting the grant, the politics behind, and what the bodies stand for, and the time of the amount government is investing in such bodies is very minute. So everyone looks up to NIH to apply for grants in US. It is because they have a system that supports research. So we need to go to the level of ensuring that the public, or maybe the governments, the policymakers, they have confidence in the kind of research we do so that they can invest into science. It's only that we can get to the level that the developing or developed countries are. So, but without that, we cannot rely 100% on foreign donors or foreign organizations for funding of our research in Africa. So we need to increase advocacy to make government invest in what we do. And concerning the modeling you have mentioned, it's a very good one. But the reality is that you cannot give what you don't have. So even if you want to do modeling, if you want to do this, do that, some of those techniques that don't require much of hands-on laboratory process. So it needs mentorship. For instance, AI is something that everyone is talking about now. But the question is, what is the capacity of Africans as far as using AI on research? So it comes to the issue of mentorship. We are talking about here. So as much as possible, we will try to continue to advocate for more mentorship. And that's why we are continuing to appreciate the mentorship program that will be launched in this conference. So I believe with mentorship and with continued collaboration, we get there as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. And one short question to Sue. When I was born, I was probably very busy myself, and I cannot remember what my mother did, but I think she was really hyperventilating. That should have reduced the pH anyway. So what is the added value of the bicarbonate, and how does it reach the nutrients?
So, okay, nice question. So it's really that first stage of labour that the bicarbonate will work out to restore the contractions, because once you go to that second stage of actually delivering the fetus, that's when all the changes in maternal breathing have most effect. And then often you're told not to hyperventilate too much because of delay in that delivery. So it's quite, as you know, I'm sure, quite complicated what you should be advising to do with the breathing and not blowing off too much CO2 as well. what was the last bit?
How would it reach the uterus?
Oh, so because you've got so much of your cardiac output going to the uterus at that stage, anything from a fifth to a fourth of your cardiac output will wash through the uterus. So that is sufficient in a time of an hour to do that. I mean, when I said that it wasn't the most sophisticated study, you know, you could think, well, should we give it IV? As soon as you start thinking IV, that's more training needed, etc. But also, you know, as a woman in labour, we've got so many indignities anyway. Drinking, I think, is better than injecting. So, yeah, but thank you.
Okay, I'm going to give 30 seconds. Questions should not be longer than 30 seconds.
So thank you so much, Professor Susan. My question is to you, and also thank you for the very enlightening presentation. My question is, should the sodium bicarbonate be, you said it is helpful to women with dysfunctional uterine contractions. So is it more on those who have prolonged labor or those who have precipitate labor? Like, where does it help? Or is it both?
Yeah, I think I hope I said that it was for those with a clinical diagnosis of prolonged or dysfunctional labour. That's the group. It would not be, I don't think, helpful to women who have got a disproportionality between their pelvis or the size of the fetus. It wouldn't be necessarily helpful because it's never going to work if you've got this disproportion. So this would be in women without other complications, should I say, yeah? I mean, I think from Ethiopia, they are world famous for their fistula clinic, and a lot of that is because there was undernourished women and, dare I say, children, and they were not ready for childbirth. There was a lot of damage done, so Ethiopia has a worldwide reputation for fistula repair. But that's not the reason for the prolonged labour I'm talking about. So thank you for letting me clarify that.
Thank you very much. My name is Benjamin, Professor of Physiology. I will ask you only one question from my friend or comment from the first presenter. Particularly when he was talking about the Nobel Prize. And indeed, I followed it very seriously, how we nominate these Nobel Prizes. And when I was taking physiology, I thought that was a very good. I'm pleased that there is no politics to that. Because the human body, that function, we say from West, Eastern and Western. So I'm not worried with this. What we are worried, why are we worried? That you are not even in that list. When I did my master's in UK back in mid-85, when I came back, I said, no, I cannot go for thinking about the Nobel Prize when you come back. And when I went to get back for my PhD in UK, then I also say I cannot think about. I read those people who are selected for Nobel Prize. Then I say I'm very far away. One, because when you write your research funding and you go to the ministry or you go to the library, they cannot give you that. They are thinking that you cannot do that. That is far. So when you compare what you are doing, what these people are doing, then you say the Nobel Prize is not for us. Yeah, sorry. So I'm glad that you answered some of your questions in selected dozens of weaknesses, benchmarking role, and so on. And I'm happy now that you people are here, you can collaborate well. For the second presenter, that's what we normally see, the level you are doing and the level that we normally teach our students. Positive feedback and negative feedback, that's all. Thank you.
30 seconds, please.
Thank you. My name is Shubi. I come from the University of Dodoma. I teach biochemistry. My question is to Professor Susan. About that lactate cycle that seems to go on in the background of the contractions. And you said the dysfunctional labor, you found correlation between the dysfunctional labor and a drop in blood pH.
Yes.
So my question is, do you have any theories on, it's as if there is some impairment in the processing of the lactate. So do you have any theories on why? So
yeah. So I have, I'd say, two suggestions. One is that in some women the blood vessels are not as robust, that they can maybe only take 20 or 30 cycles of compression before they are not as functional. So their response to hypoxia, etc. So that's one limit. The other is that perhaps the deficit is at the level of the uterine smooth muscle cell and how it transports lactate, how it buffers and regulates its pH. So lactate we know has to be, there's a transporter for lactate, actually no. Perhaps in some women that is not expressed as robustly or as the wrong isoform than it is in other women. So these are just suggestions, and if something else has occurred to you, I'd be very happy afterwards to chat about it. But those are my two main. They're both quite hard to study because we don't know in advance which women will have dysfunctional labours. We can say what risk factors are. You know, if you're obese, there's somewhat more chance. But we have very slim, very fit mothers who also get dysfunctional labour. It's not if you're black or white. We all get dysfunctional labour. So it's quite hard to know in advance and to get those samples. But thank you. Yeah.
About knowing in advance, maybe they have a general impairment in processing lactate, so some enzymes in the liver. So the Cori cycle is not.
Yeah. So for some of those, because they're actually quite serious conditions, most of those that we're talking about, those women, if they even manage to get pregnant, the clinicians will make sure they have an elective cesarean section. So they won't put them through the rigours of labour. They will have the cesarean section. So we don't know what the outcomes might have been. We can make guesses, but yeah, those women who are not medically well are looked after differently, obviously, from how can we put it, the rest of the female population who are pregnant.
Okay, let's do a thunderclap and finish the session.
And clap.
Thank you very much, Professor Abdullateef. Amazing session in the beginning. Please, you can have your seats back. Okay, we are going to go to the next session.